Hi, I'm Emina Demiri-Watson, and this is SEO in 2025.
Emina, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My biggest tip is basically to not be hung up on SEO as such, but rather to think about the changing role of SEO in 2025 and even in 2024. Whether you call it SEO, SXO, or OSO, which is something we heard at Brighton SEO, I think the role of SEO needs to change. So you, as an SEO, need to understand wider digital marketing and utilize wider multi-channel marketing to succeed.
What's OSO?
OSO, organic search optimization.
Got you. Okay. So essentially optimizing wherever you can be found organically. So that could include somewhere like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube.
Yes. So that's the thing, whatever you call it. And this OSO is something that I picked up on Brighton SEO. So Valentina Stagliato, I probably mispronounced her name, actually spoke about this. And she spoke about it in terms of kind of Gen Z and YouTube and TikTok and things like that. But for me, I mean, I've been in the industry for over 10 years. I don't think it's a generational thing. I think that we should be thinking about digital marketing, not just search engine optimization, which is part of the reason why we get into this muddle of showing our results, is because we're kind of focusing only on stuff like traffic and ranking and things like that, where actually you should be focusing on business value and business result. But as soon as you put that in, you have to have a wider understanding. You have to have an understanding of analytics. You have to have an understanding of omni-channel. I mean, it's much more complex when you bring in the actual impact for businesses.
Understood. So you're not saying that SEO is changing radically. You're just saying the importance of SEO to work effectively with other channels is increasing.
I think it's also changing the role of SEO because when you think about how SEO has been in the last year alone and what's been happening wider in digital marketing. So, for example, the fact that the user journey is not linear, and it's never been linear. I mean, it's a complete myth that it has ever been linear, but now more than ever, it's not linear. Even in ecommerce, you have 2 touch points before you actually buy anything. The other side is the privacy side of things. So these days, attribution almost impossible to do. I mean, I'd argue that it was impossible to do before. It wasn't very correct.
It was just guessing, really.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's even more guessing because everything is based on modeling. And modeling without data is very flawed. So there's that as well. And then when you look at where Google is going and what's going on in Google these days, so you have new SERPs that are coming up, new features, the rise of Reddit, perspectives, which will now be forums, the fact that video search is stronger than ever. I mean, there's a difference between SEO for YouTube and SEO for Google when there shouldn't be. You should know kind of both of those things and understand how it all works together. So I would argue that the role of an SEO has become much wider than it has ever been. And it's no longer about just aligning the channels. We're not talking only about like, make sure that your paid channels sing the same from the same song sheet as your SEO. We're talking about very much blending of these channels, even inside the SERPs.
But in terms of the user journey and attribution, I accept that it's much more difficult to get an accurate view on individual users as they proceed through different channels to hopefully make some kind of transaction with you. But you can still probably build an average picture of what an average user looks like and perhaps use that to maybe build a content strategy around different channels out there. Is that a reasonable suggestion?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it depends also on the amount of data that you have. So for an enterprise company, data modeling is brilliant because they have so much data that's going into the models for the models to actually learn from something. It becomes a little bit more difficult if you have a small company that doesn't have a lot of data. Then statistically, it doesn't really make sense because you're making decisions on, one or two conversions a month, let's say. I mean, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be using that data. You should be using that data. But I think ultimately, particularly for small and medium businesses, you need to and this is where the other complexity comes in. We always talk about it should be about the customers, and yet customer research isn't something that many companies actually do and come to us with. As an agency, a company comes in, they want to rank on Google. They don't come in with a bunch of market research around their customers, which, immediately puts you on the wrong foot. If you don't have the data that's feeding into the models and you don't have the market research and you haven't done the customer insight piece, then it's incredibly difficult. And as an SEO, you need to be able to say that to the client. You need to be able to say, okay, right, this is the data that you have. These are the gaps. Let's see how we can fill in those gaps. But unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And also, you're not always paid for it. It's kind of, people just want you to get them the rankings and the traffics and the conversions. And it's difficult for a medium or a small company to invest in that first piece, which is super important.
It would be great to get a flavor from you for how you think other channels attract users, but also what content users engage best with on different channels, and then maybe how that impacts a user's next step, perhaps a search on Google or something like that. So, I mean, you've mentioned, for example, Reddit previously, you touched on YouTube. So these different channels, are there one or two tips that you'd like to give in terms of the best user experience to serve there?
I think it really does depend on the platform and your customer and what they're looking for. I think that's, this idea of intent also works on YouTube and works on TikTok and works on other channels as well, because people are using it as a search engine. They're not a search engine, but they are using it as such. My advice would be to map out your customer journey. I think that's really important. And this is what I've been hearing about this since I started my career.
So just create the one standard customer journey that applies to your average user.
I don't think you should do one standard. It's about kind of thinking about who your buying committee is. Who are these people that you're engaging with?
Okay, so personas, so different...
Personas, different personas, but not in terms of, the usual kind of side of things where you have like this profile and doesn't give you anything really. It's more about thinking about more in detail where they are, what are the conversations that they're having on these platforms, what are they interested in, trying to also predict what the next step is. This is something that kind of, you were asking about people coming to Google after they've seen a social media post. What would they be putting into there? Would they be putting your brand or would they be putting something else? Is there a moment in your customer journey where social media is not enough, which is when they switch to Google? And what will they search after? What's that next kind of search that they're going to perform is something that I think you should be thinking about when creating your content, really.
Yeah, I like the idea of creating different user journeys for different personas and having a firm idea of who you're targeting and what they're likely to want to engage with on the different channels.
Yeah, and we do that quite a lot. So with our clients, what we do is we will, if they have personas, we'll have a look at those and usually kind of rip it apart and kind of think about, then we'll think about listening to their demos. If they're a SaaS company, recording your demos, listening to those demos, it's an incredible data source. The same with the customer calls. So we'll do that piece as well. And then we'll get them into a room to actually build those user journeys for these personas in a way where it will feed into their content, on the website, on social media. So it's about how can you kind of use this in your digital marketing universe to get people in.
You also mentioned, what are people doing when they come to Google? Are they actually searching for your brand? Does that mean that the goal of content on other platforms will be to get them to remember your brand so that they do actually search for it in Google when they come to it?
I think part of it is this kind of awareness piece. And this is like the age-old conversation, whether, branded versus non-branded keywords and topics and stuff like that. It is definitely part of it. Some of it is going to be about thinking about what the next commercial search is going to be. So if somebody isn't looking for something informational on TikTok or YouTube or somewhere else, is there any commercial searches that are connected to that might take place on Google? Maybe there isn't. Maybe the commercial searches are still on TikTok and are still on YouTube. And that's something that an SEO should be thinking about, really.
Okay, so does the fact that other platforms are serving content and users are interacting on there make it necessary for every SEO to be aware of these platforms and how they operate? Or can, for instance, a technical SEO just stay focused on the technical aspects of a website without worrying too much about other channels?
That's a really hard question, because I stayed the head of digital marketing. I stayed in digital marketing for a reason. I didn't want to specialize because I'm very curious, so I'm interested in everything. I guess technical is one of those things that is a bit tricky because it's so complex and it's so wide. And it's, depending on the size of the website, it needs very extremely particular expertise that you develop over years and years and years of practice. So it's a very specialized role. I mean, I would say it depends. I think they need to have some kind of like understanding of the wider digital, why are we doing this? Because when you think about technical SEOs, one of the things that happens is, more than in any other type of SEO, is this disconnect between technical fixes and technical kind of tasks and the business. This is why a lot of the times people are saying, well, what's the impact of that? What is why should we do this technical fix? And understanding that gives you an advantage. Whether you go and actually do that, it's up to you. Whether you have to do it, I guess it depends on who you work with. For us, we hire people who are specialized, but also understand the wider environment that it sits in.
So what I'm hearing from that is that technical SEOs should probably be T-shaped marketers, and creative SEOs should probably be generalists, content creatives. Is that correct?
That's very, I wouldn't go as far as saying you should, you need to like be completely T-shaped. Or I think, I personally think a T-shaped marketer is something that you should have. You should have at least one. If you're an agency, if you're, in-house, you have to have somebody who can understand.
Bring things together. Yeah.
Yeah, bring things together. I'm not saying everybody needs to be like that. I just feel like, considering the changes that have happened in the last year, it's more and more becoming an emphasis on either at least having somebody in the team who's like that, because otherwise it just won't work these days.
So many changes happening, so many opportunities in which to target new traffic, new users. How does an SEO stay on top of things without stretching themselves too thinly?
Oh, I mean, look, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, considering that I sit at 6 o'clock in the morning on LinkedIn. So I really love my job. So I spend a lot of time kind of reading, and it's tough. It's really real. Not everybody is going to want to do that. My advice would be, what has helped a lot is communities. So I am part of Women in Technical SEO community, for example. Amazing, brilliant for keeping up to date. You don't have to go to everything. You don't have to follow every channel, but it's a really good spot to kind of keep to date. I mean, there's a bunch of resources online, as we know, and the more you work in the industry, the more you can discern between where you go for those updates, what are actually the websites that can be trusted and that do the work. And it's not always those that rank number one on Google. This is the thing, which is something that you understand later on as you go through your career, really.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
I think they should stop worrying about certain things. So as an example, 404 pages, that one just ticks me over completely. There's this, and it's always been around, there's this obsession about 404 pages when they are very much part of the normal internet experience. There's cases when you do need to worry about them. If you have backlinks from pages and you don't want to lose the value of those backlinks, then worry about them. But spending hours mapping out 404 pages without understanding what they're actually doing before you do that is just a complete waste of time. So there's that bit. There's meta description as well. Great for clicks, but even these days, that's questionable because obviously Google is always messing around with them. So there's a few kind of these individual tasks where people waste a lot of time. Link building in terms of outreach, stop wasting time on that because it just doesn't work. I mean, we have agencies and agencies that are spending a lot of time sending cold emails to blogs to include links. I mean, that might have worked like 10 years ago, but it doesn't work these days. So think about what you're doing and where you're spending your time, and then try and shave that off. And also make sure that you're putting in the time for training and for the education piece and kind of the updates and stuff like that. Be very strict with yourself and put in some time to make sure you're up to date with things.
Emina Demiri-Watson is Head of Digital Marketing at Vixen Digital, and you can find her over at vixendigital.com. Emina, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.